Hi, I'm Dee from Pixel Quilts, and if you're watching this, then chances are you're ready to begin your first pixel quilt. So I wanted to answer a few questions and give you the answers to the most frequent questions I get asked. Each pattern will come with a breakdown of what fabrics you need to buy and in exactly what shade of Kona cotton you need to buy them and how much. It will then give you a breakdown of how to cut each shade so that you have the right pixel pieces. And there is also an idea at the back of the pattern to give you a breakdown of how to cut the pieces so they will fit into the fabric. The fabric sizing is very generous, so even if you make a mistake, you're almost guaranteed that you will have enough fabric. Once you've cut your fabric, the big word of the whole of the rest of the project is going to be organisation. I really think that being organised when you're doing a pixel quilt will make everything a lot easier. I'll show you how I organised my fabric while I'm sewing the quilt. For cutting up the blocks, if I don't have the space, then I will go ahead and use Ziploc bags and bag up each colour with their shade and their corresponding number. Do you have the space, then I will go ahead and lay them out in exactly the same way. They're just not all bagged up and they're easier to get your hands on. I personally think it's easier to get each block ready at a time, and I use the pattern to pick the correct blocks and lay them out on cardstock. Once the pattern pieces are laid out, you need to divide them into sub-blocks that it's going to be easy to sew them all together. So I just take a moment and move the pieces to make them into sub-blocks so they're easy to piece. You're ready to piece and you have your block divided into sub-blocks. Now you're ready to sew. The only part about this I will say is just get used to being really accurate with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. That is going to allow the block to go together easiest and for all the blocks to fit together. When I'm sewing, I will have an iron pressing mat and a clapper right beside me ready to iron after every piece. I tend to use a smaller iron for piecing and then a larger one to press whole rows and press the whole quilt. The other thing that you can do, which I sometimes use and sometimes don't, is use a spray like Best Press or a starch spray, which just gives you less flexibility in the fabric and makes it a little bit easier to sew. When you have finished your block, I always go ahead and follow the pattern and sew it to the block that it's next to. The same can also be said for when I finished a row. I would always give it a good press and then sew it to the row above. It just helps you to keep tabs on exactly how the quilt is coming together and enables you to be more accurate. My most frequently asked questions about these quilts are, can I substitute colours? And I will say, if you have done a pattern and it is of a face or of a person, then changing any shade in the face can alter the entire look of the quilt. So I usually recommend do not change or substitute any of the colours, no matter how good you are at substituting hues and colours. When pressing your quilt, I personally will press always to the dark side. That's the gold standard, and if I can do that every time, I will do it. I do not recommend pressing your seams open because there are so many seams on this quilt. On any pixel quilt, I think it makes it weaker. If you run across a little bunch of seams that you're not able to press to the dark side because there would be too much bulk, it's okay. It will be fine. It will work. I know it's hard for perfectionists, but get your clapper out, give it a good press. Honestly, it'll be okay. Do I recommend doing a back stitch at every seam? Some of these quilts that I've made have got 5,000 pieces, and the thought of doing a back stitch for every single one of those fills me with dread, and I think you would actually double your time doing it. I don't, personally. But one way I do get around this so that it's secure is that I decrease my stitch length to 2, from 2.5 to 2. And I think that just gives it the strength that it needs so that I don't have to backstitch. But I will add this disclaimer, it's completely down to you. I also get asked a lot why some of the blocks can't be bigger. This is a long answer, but to make it super brief, it's to avoid Y seams. As soon as you start introducing smaller blocks, the need for Y seams is greatly reduced. The other question which I've heard is, how do I know what size pixel to pick to make up the block pattern when it doesn't have sizes on it? The sizes are limited. They're limited to 1 pixel, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, 6 pixels and 8 pixels. So, and the block is broken up into halves and quarters with the notches. Now you're able to look at that and know exactly what a 1 pixel looks like and what a 2 pixel looks like just from looking at the block without knowing anything about it. You'd almost, on the other end, you'd almost be able to recognize an 8 pixel block. So bearing in mind those, that's how you judge which pixel is the correct size for that area. Now, to begin with, it may seem a bit complex, and people have asked me to put the pixel size on the blocks, but there is just not enough space for that. And it's one of these things that when you start, it can take you a little while to suss it out, but soon you won't even think about it and you'll just be doing it. What if I am unable to buy Kona and I want to match to a different fabric line? Well, as I've mentioned before, I would not recommend doing that when it comes to faces. The exact shades that the pattern produces are the shades that make the quilt look exactly how it is. So if you veer off of that, then I will have no idea of how it will look. And like I said, even just one shade different can practically ruin an entire quilt. If you're interested in other fabric lines, then do drop me an email and let me know. I'm always looking for the next best fabric line to add, and so having your feedback is great.